Hi, I'm Nero, and in this video I will talk about the 6 things that convince me the most that relativity is wrong. Number 1 is the Michelson-Morley experiment, or more like what people think of the Michelson-Morley experiment. Because after watching a lot of the people's opinions on the Michelson-Morley experiment, I can clearly see that people don't understand the experiment. Like, not even the machine itself, what it can do, what it cannot do, what it can measure, how it works, what it was attempted with it, what was the intention with it. People do not understand it. That's it. They just don't understand at all. It's very funny, actually, to look at the very opinions of different people and like what everyone says, because everyone says something different. It's very funny. There are very different interpretations, very different opinions. It's crazy because there is no understanding in the experiment, so everyone says something different. I talked about this in my other video, but basically, yeah, it's not understood. And the main purpose of the experiment was to measure if a luminous ether existed or not. And it seemed to prove that it did not, but for some reason, there were also people that started to say that it proved that the relativistic thing, the light being constant everywhere always, it was also proved by the Michelson-Morley experiment, which it makes no sense. As I said in my previous video, the machine 1 was not designed to really measure with high precision the speed of light, and secondly, the machine, every part of it was still not moving, so it didn't have speed relative to itself, so it could also not measure any difference in the speed of light. So with those two things, it was completely impossible to prove if light was really constant always everywhere or not. It was completely impossible for that experiment. It was irrelevant to it. I don't know how it got to that conclusion. The second thing I want to talk about is about the absolute or relative speed. Up until that year, up until that point, with Newtonian physics, speed was considered and velocity was considered to be relative, always, against everything. There was no such thing as absolute speed. And in Einstein papers about relativity, he tries to say that he is treating speed as something relative, but that's just word using. He just says he's using speed as something relative, but that's not true, because then when everything that does with light is treating it as an absolute speed, it's always that one, no more nor less. There is no change. It's always that against everything else. It's an absolute speed. It's like an absolute point of reference. But the thing is, that's not how speed and velocity works. There is no such thing as absolute speed or velocity, and that creates a lot of problems with many things. You have like a sort of reference point, or like the addition of velocities. If you add velocities together, you are adding vectors and you get a result by adding those two velocities, but then it is completely against the absolute speed of light, and it breaks everything down, and it's so weird. If you launch a beam of light and then you accelerate against it, those two velocities should add up, and you should have now the speed of light against the beam of light that you just threw. But it has to be absolute, no? It can't go up further than the speed of light, so it's very weird. You're treating speed like if it was absolute, and it makes everything so weird and complicated and impossible to work. It makes no sense. It creates like, well, many problems and things when you try to play around with adding velocities, and it's such a mess just for trying to treat speed or velocity as something absolute. And as I said, Einstein and most of the people that talk about relativity say and treat speed and velocity like something relative. They don't say absolute, but that's the fact. They actually are treating the speed of light like something absolute. So it's like there are speeds that are absolute because the speed of light is, according to them, and it's such a mess. As I was editing this part, I came up with an analogy that I think can explain a bit of my problem with it. Newtonian physics and the understanding of speed and velocity was established for about 200 years, and it worked very well. During 200 years, a lot of time, and it worked very well. So, clearly, if there was going to be any changes in our physics understanding, it could be, but it should be very little. It shouldn't change a lot with what we already knew, because it will be impossible for something very different to exist when for about 200 years something appeared to work extremely well. It's like basically impossible to have something so different to give the exact same thing. And what was clearly established is that motion was relative. Like you could say, well, we found something that is going very fast in relation to everything else, or we found that something goes very slowly, or we found that speed also does this other thing, has this other effect, or whatever. Those are things that were possible with what was already established. But what is completely incompatible with that notion of relative motion is an absolute motion, an absolute speed. It's completely impossible to try to push that into what we already knew, what was already established. That was kinda what was broken with this absolute speed for light, trying to make the speed of light absolute. It's like you're trying to use the same physical unit, the speed, but in a way that is not valid. You could make another physical unit, something that is not speed, something else, and establish that other thing as absolute, and then call that light works with that thing, but not with speed or velocity. I just wanted to say that as a quick addition. Alright, the third point is the clock paradox or twin paradox. In relativity, especially in special relativity, there is supposedly a time dilation that occurs when two objects have a different relative speed relative to each other. But the thing is, as speed is relative, there is no way to say which one is like moving or not moving or going faster, because it's just a relative speed. But the aging and the time dilation does matter, which one is the one going slower or going faster, which one edges slower, edges faster, because maybe one can end up dead and the other is still alive. It's very important to determine which is which, but as speed and velocity are relative, there is no way to determine which one is which. And this is what creates the clock paradox or twin paradox, which is a very famous paradox which has been talked for a long time by many people. In the other video I mentioned the paper Science at the Crossroads by Herbert Tingle. I'm going to talk a bit more about it now, this time, because it talks a lot about this paradox, the clock paradox, and I think it explains it very well, and it does a good job at explaining why it is a paradox and why there is no way to explain it. It has a lot of text, it's quite long, and I recommend reading the whole paper, but I will try to go through the most important parts. Here it describes the paradox, the setup of the two clocks going at a relative speed. It just explains it how it is. In the paper it clearly mentions that he is trying to be like neutral and trying to let the reader think for himself what he thinks makes the most sense. Like, as it says here, my duty is to make it known. Its significance is for him to judge. It means to be set to enable the reader to form his own estimate. So yeah, I think that's great. Here it says where the problem comes. That is, if one is moving, like if both are moving, how can you say which one is which? I'm going through it fast, but you can read it wholly on your spare time. I think he describes it very well. And I also wanted to point this video by Dialect called Why Solutions to the Twin Paradox Are Wrong, which I really recommend watching. I think he explains very well how the different solutions that are public by many people on very popular videos, they talk about the twin paradox and try to explain it in different ways, contradicting each other, and no solution really seems to be right. And some even say that the solutions that the other people give are wrong. Like some explanations on some videos are, yeah, but only one is accelerating and the other one is at rest. And the others say, no, that's not how it works. You can just say just one accelerates, because acceleration is also relative, and also both objects could be accelerating. So no, that explanation is wrong, makes no sense. So you are wrong. This part is wrong. And the other one says, no, but you cannot claim that it is because one it is at Earth, because even if it is at Earth is also a speed and could also be accelerating, or again could be two separate objects like spaceships or whatever accelerating. So you're staying at the Earth is not a valid point either. So you are wrong. You are wrong. You don't have the correct solution. No, you are wrong. No, you are wrong. The time dilation is true, but because another reason. No, time dilation is true, but because of my reason. Then what? I wanted to point this out because it reminds me a lot about religion. Yes, God is real, but the Christianity God is real. No. God is real, but the Islamic God is real. You are wrong. No, you are wrong. My God is real. No, your God is not real. My God is. No, you. Hey, but at least we both agree that there is a God, right? So, I guess, yeah, I guess. Then God is real. No. You have to agree on why it is so. If you cannot even agree of why, I don't know why so many people say that this paradox is solved. It is clearly not. People are clearly not agreeing with each other of why it is how it is. Like they cannot even agree and they contradict each other and they say that it is wrong. I think this video shows that decently well. You can see more of these videos and investigate more yourself, but you will see that they don't even agree with that. I think that's a huge point against them. The fourth point is about the measurements with GPS to measure the difference in the speed of light, which is something that I talked a lot on my previous video, so I won't talk as much on this one, but basically I saw some papers that talk about measurements done with GPS technology during more or less 1919 to 2010, more or less those years, a bit after the GPS technology was developed, that seemed to conclude that it was detected the difference in the speed of light in regards to the motion of the Earth as it rotates, creating a difference going eastward and westward with the speed of the rotation of Earth. It seems that was measured several times by several people on GPS, and as I say in my previous video, I found that like very telling and very suspicious. You can go watch my video to see more about that, and you can also read the papers that I mentioned in that video, which I will also mention here. Actually, one is GPS and the one-way speed of light, and the other one is one-way light speed determination using range measurements equation of the GPS. both are by Stefan J. Giff. You can go read them or watch my previous video to see more about that. But it seems that GPS measurements were able to measure the difference in the speed of light. The fifth point is light bending, which I think is a very strong one and very easy to see, and how people talk about it is, well, gravity is like a force and an acceleration. I think there are like two different things that are both said to be gravity, which one is force and the other is an acceleration. But the thing is, if you use Newton's law of universal gravitation and one of the masses is constant, then the force is directly proportional to the mass, and therefore you have a constant acceleration. And sometimes gravity is used as an acceleration, so basically gravity is an acceleration. There is no way around that. It's an acceleration. Alright, but then what is the definition of acceleration? Acceleration, by mere definition, is a change in velocity. The way that planets and bodies orbit each other is because they are changing velocity. They are accelerating and changing velocity to orbit. It's literally how orbits work. And they're changing in velocity. And if it changes in velocity, it changes in velocity because it is literally what it is saying in the same phrase. And the thing is, right, if light wasn't affected by gravity for some reason, then I guess whatever. But the thing is, people seem to agree that light is affected by gravity. And I think it makes sense because, as I said, if the mass is constant, then you have a constant acceleration. With this object of this mass at this distance, there is a gravity of this mass acceleration, and everything accelerates. So why wouldn't light do so too? And indeed, people seem to agree that it does accelerate. Alright, then light is accelerating, which is also like why they say that there is gravitational lensing and that light bends because of that, because of gravity. They literally say so. It is literally agreed upon. So I don't know. Alright, then light is bending and because it is accelerating. Alright, then if it is accelerating, then it is accelerating. It is changing in speed. Alright, because of orbital mechanics, if you, for example, have an orbit that is like escape orbit, and you like come from very far, go near the object at the perihelion, and then you exit it like an interstellar object going through the solar system or whatever, you will accelerate when you go towards the object, towards the sun, for example, and then when you leave it, you will decelerate and you will end up with the same speed. Alright, and then light more or less remains the same. And also, if light is very fast and the massive object is not too massive, it won't have too much of an acceleration. Alright, whatever, but in actual terms, is it actually? It should be, because like it has everything on the definition. It should be accelerated. In the perihelion, it should be a little faster. And even if it is just a little, it contradicts relativity because it says that it is absolute constant. So what is going on there? Like literally orbits work because they accelerate and they change in speed. Light is also affected by gravity, yet what about that? Like literally, I'm a software developer and I program code to make these simulations. What should I even program with light? Like I literally do a change in velocity. That's gravity. It's an acceleration, a change in velocity, and that's how orbits work. Alright, if I have to calculate gravity, the acceleration, then it gives me a different speed, but then it has to remain the speed c, the speed of light. Then what do? I do a transformation. I transform that vector to have the same magnitude, but then the orbit won't match. It will go faster and it won't remain in orbit, or I don't know, it will do weird things, because like, what am I doing? A vector transformation just so the speed remains the same. Like, what do I even have to code? Like, it is an acceleration, it is changing speed, it is how it works. I don't see anyone talking about this, but they are so comfortable talking about, yeah, it is affected by gravity, it bends, and gravitational lensing and all of that. And I'm like, alright, then what is going on? Like, it is not accelerating, it is not changing speed. I don't understand. It seems very obvious to me. Anyway, I guess that's my fifth point. I think I made it clear, I hope. And finally, point number 6 is actually the people, the community, the scientific community, and the people I've talked to. That's my point number 6. Because this community clearly hasn't shown me interest for actual truth, productive conversations, of trying to really be nice people and try to explain things and work with people in collaboration to try to actually make sense of things. People weren't collaborating, weren't trying to be useful, weren't trying to be nice, weren't trying to explain things. Hardly anyone ever showed me any sources or proofs or maths or equations or ways to make the things. They weren't trying to explain me things. They were just trying to make fun of me, trying to say how stupid I am, how I didn't understand things, how I should learn more and study more because I'm retarded, or because I should go to school again, or just trying to make fun of me, not trying to actually work with me. It's very different. Something is very different to the other things. It is clearly very different. They weren't trying to collaborate. And that is my point number 6. Because why? Why would these people act this way? Why, if they clearly have answers for everything and they clearly think those are the correct things and have very clear explanations of why and can explain them to me, why wouldn't they? Why would they go in this very inhumane and stupid way to only try to humiliate me and make fun of me? Why? I see it as very clearly, like the way how people weren't being useful. It kinda made me think that I was maybe actually right, and that these people didn't really know much of what they were talking about. And those are my 6 points. Those are basically the 6 points that I think are the most good or valid or more convincing to me. Tell me what you think in the comments, I guess. And I guess I will see you in other videos.